Good evening. I'm Corvallis Advocate Assistant Editor Emily Radcliffe, and co-moderating with me tonight is our publisher, Steve Schultz, who also serves as president of the City Club of Corvallis. Welcome to tonight's CitySpeak Forum. CitySpeak Forums are co-presented by the Corvallis Advocate and the City Club of Corvallis. The Advocate offers fresh Corvallis news daily online, these town hall meetings, and extensive events calendars. Our co-presenter, the City Club of Corvallis, is a volunteer-run nonprofit organization that seeks to present a diversity of viewpoints and constructive dialogue. Next month, our CitySpeak will host a public Q&A with retiring Corvallis Police Chief Nick Hurley and incoming Chief Jason Harvey. This evening, we conclude 4 nights of election debates with the 3 Corvallis City Council seats that are contested this cycle. We start with the debate between candidates for Ward 2. At 6:30, we move to Ward 3. And at 7 o'clock, we conclude with Ward 9. This weekend, the Corvallis Advocate will publish their endorsements. The co-presenter of City Club of Corvallis doesn't make endorsements of any kind. If you, as a viewer, have questions for our guests, we welcome you to comment on our Facebook posting of the live stream event or to email us at cityspeak@corvallisadvocate.com. Again, that's cityspeak@corvallisadvocate.com. Steve?
Thank you, Emily. Partial funding for these forums come from Peak Sports and First Alternative Natural Foods Co-op. However, we could not present CitySpeak without support from viewers like you. Please consider a subscription. Visit our site. There's levels at $10 or $15 monthly, and donations over and above are welcome. Folks, locally run news outlets like the Corvallis Advocate are exceedingly scarce in our country and even throughout the world at this point. And really scarcer still are community members that are donating or subscribing. If you see that somebody's advertising at the Advocate, support them. They are often trying to help, and they are a local business. If you're not yet a subscriber and want to consider joining the group that are, again, hit our website. And I would be remiss to not say thank you to those who have been supporting us for really quite a number of years. So a heartfelt thank you from myself and our whole staff. Emily?
Thank you, Steve. So first, thank you to Christina Jancila and Briae Lewis for joining us for this first round of this evening's City Council debates. So first question, City Council terms run 2 years. What is a singular issue you would hope to impact in Corvallis during the next 2 years? If you could only impact just one thing, what would your goal be? And what would the city, in your view, need to do to achieve that goal? Ms. Jancila, I'll start with you. 2 minutes or less to respond, please.
Thank you, Emily, for that. As a business owner in Ward 2 and a property owner in Ward 2, I hope to bring a robust representation. For some time, businesses were not supported. We had the closure of the DCA, the Downtown Advisory Board, and there has been no vigorous representation. So I hope within the 2 years to bring the voices of Ward 2 to council and to make some change happen.
All right, and Ms. Lewis, 2 minutes or less to respond, please.
Thank you very much. So I believe transportation, since that is an immediate issue that we're facing currently. Our contract with MTR Western is coming to an end in 2023. And since we've had so many concerns brought up prior to this driver deficit, I believe that that is one of our most essential problems that we need to tackle right now and immediately. Currently, according with Campo, they have programs for 2022 to 2024 that they're already implementing, as well as the electric buses and with charging facilities. And I think that's very important, especially if we're going to abide by the recently accepted climate-friendly and equitable communities rules. On top of that, we need to actually look for a third party because unfortunately, currently with city staff being stretched really thin and unable to hire, it's going to be a struggle to bring it in-house, but I would like to see that happen within the 2 years if elected.
Hi, thank you. And the City Council recently approved the Corvallis Green New Deal for climate and housing justice. As a councilor, what would you do first to implement this? And what are your views in general on the connections between taking action on the climate crisis and providing direct support to community members experiencing houselessness? Ms. Lewis, I'll start with you. 2 minutes or less to respond, please.
So for houselessness has affected the entire community. That's in part due to OSU only housing 17 to 20% of their enrolled students, with the 80% being in Albany and Lebanon and Corvallis, which raises the prices. 40% of commuters are willing to live in Corvallis, since they also work in Corvallis, if they can find the right and affordable housing, since we are limited in the diverse housing that is currently available. I also believe that to help the crisis would also implement cluster communities, which will also have like energy efficiency built in. That way, not only you're tackling 2 issues with one, you're tackling homelessness and you're also tackling climate change. And I believe that will actually bring us closer to our goal. Even though we're already 7 years in advance, I believe that will bring us closer to our goal.
Thank you. And Ms. Jancila, 2 minutes or less to respond, please.
Ward 2 has our history. And with that being said, we have an infrastructure that's built on fossil fuel. With passing the Green New Deal, that brings us closer to eliminating, brings us closer to building a greener infrastructure. That's going to take some time, but it was a good path forward to getting Ward 2 greener. As far as affecting people experiencing homelessness, that has climate change has a significant impact. We have to do better. I would like to work closely with the nonprofit providers regarding houselessness and how we can achieve a better result than what we have now.
And then what, as a counselor, would you advocate for to accelerate the availability of housing that's affordable to the bottom 25% of area income earners, and above that for folks up to 50%? Ms. Jancila, 1 minute or less to respond, please.
We have 3 options. We can either build up, we can build out, or we can do both. But with the new state rules and the mixed use zoning, it gives Ward 2 a chance to build up. So with that being said, that will get us closer to having more options for people to live downtown. As my opponent described on August 24th, she spends half of her salary on rent. So there is no available options for her and for a lot of families. So by building upwards, especially in Ward 2 that's made for downtown, we have a better option, more affordability.
All right, and Ms. Lewis, your response in 1 minute or less, please.
Thank you. So according to the housing needs analysis in 2016, there have been, we need 177 new housing per year up until 2036. Now, that is a lot, and that is not including the in commuters. So I believe cluster housing and preventative housing will be our best bet. There have been a lot of cluster housing for veterans and homelessness in different cities. In 2018, there was one in Kansas City, Missouri, and it was very effective, and it's still effective with all amenities, with in-case managers, and I think that is also an idea we should look into.
All right, thank you. And then as the city considers various developments, especially in reference to housing, how much weight should neighborhood and homeowner groups and association have on city decision-making? Ms. Lewis, 1 minute or less to respond, please.
I mean, everyone's part of this community, so I think any input is good input. We need to have conversations with people because not only will it affect those that need the housing that are affected most in the pricing issue, but also those who are not so affected, but they still have to live next to other people and they have concerns just as the rest of us. I believe that we need to have robust conversations instead of saying Corvallis looks like that, because I know a lot of people think that, and that's not true. Corvallis does not look like that. It's a beautiful city, and I think working together and hearing from each other will make this a better place.
Okay, and Ms. Jancila, 1 minute or less to respond, please.
Yes, we have to bring the neighborhoods in on the conversation. Any type of building does affect everyone. But the thing is that if we need this housing, we have to accept some change, and with change comes improvements. Some people may not like it, but we've got to look for what's good for the community.
Right, and then Oregonians prioritize 2 issues, homelessness and crime. What would you do to address the issue of crime if you were elected city councilor? Ms. Jancila, 1 minute or less to respond, please.
Well, we have to, what I would like to see is more involvement in community court. It really, I don't want to put people into the cycle of putting them in jail, coming out, they can't afford fines, they can't afford restitution, in that cycle again. So I would like to see a community court, them enter in a program, and once that is done, the misdemeanor or whatever, it could be just expunged. As far as, livability, that's important. So I think working closely with the people that are experiencing homelessness and the crime, I think we really have to address this head on and find some solutions to this.
All right, and Ms. Lewis, 1 minute or less to respond, please.
So out of the entire state of Oregon, Albany and Corvallis are the only 2 that are accredited or highly accredited. And I believe we're already making a lot of progress in getting our crime reduced because there is so much community involvement with the police. However, I do think we can do better, and I believe more conversations between the community that the police serve and the police officers themselves, because they are also being stretched into different programs that we are kickstarting to also help with our house unhoused. Because we do have that similar program that's in cahoots in Eugene, but that also requires an officer. So right now we have to focus on not only where our officers are focused right now in projects, but we also need to realize that rehabilitation is better than putting someone in jail.
Right, and then the city council recently chose to forestall its own action on requiring homeowners to obtain an energy usage audit or home energy score prior to putting their homes on the market, and instead put the potential requirement to voters. First, do you personally support the requirement, and do you believe it was better to move the matter to a public vote than for the council to decide? Ms. Lewis, 1 minute or less to respond, please.
So I do agree with the home energy score. However, I know there are better alternatives than to paying the $200. Pacific Power, I believe, also has a similar resource that you can, a similar tool that can give you that same or similar results without having to pay the $200. So I agree with the concept. I don't agree of the payment. I do believe that it should have been handled by City Council because it was given to City Council to handle in the first place. So I don't agree that it should have been given back to the voters because it was such a contingent issue in the first place that was brought up by the voters. So giving it back to them, be like, well, now you have to deal with it, is, I don't think, is what the City Council should have done. And I don't believe that's what elected officials are.
And Ms. Jancila, 1 minute or less to respond, please.
Considering the facts around this, I think it was the right decision to give it to the voters. There were a few issues that weren't addressed. Now, if you're looking at homes in Ward 2, there's historic districts, the Avery Helm Historic District. Most of these homes in Ward 2 are at least 100 years old. There was no discussion of how this would impact historic homes. They are supposed to keep their architectural integrity and to retrofit for energy saving products, energy efficient products would cost a great deal of money. The construction on these older homes are over, 100 years old. So I think it was the right decision and we needed to have a more robust conversation regarding the energy score.
And then by most accounts, the worldwide economy finds itself in uncertain times, and it appears our economy is no exception. Given the times, what steps do you believe the city should be considering next year as it prepares its budget? Ms. Jancila, 2 minutes or less to respond, please.
I think that we have to really get down to basics. We can't spend money on things that we want. We have to stick to the infrastructure and what is needed. It would be nice to have certain amenities, but with inflation, shortage of labor, it's important to stick and maintain what we have now until there's a turn in the economy for the better.
Okay, and Ms. Lewis, 2 minutes or less to respond, please.
I believe the immediate projects are the ones that we need to focus on, such as our transportation and the business right of way. Those are the two issues right now currently that are affecting us most. Yes, we do have our houseless crisis, but we also have to figure out a way to put those funds in the right projects so we don't have so much of a financial issue, not only that for our city, but for our county and for our residents, because that is the trickle down that happens in our economy, and that is not okay. So I believe that with focusing on the main projects that we need to focus on right now, that is detrimental to us at this moment, that will help us not only budget for the future, but also bring those expenses down from where it is now as well.
All right, thank you both. I will now hand it over to Steve for audience questions.
Thank you, Emily. I'd like to remind the audience that if you have a question that you'd like to get asked, you can still email us at cityspeak@corvallisadvocate.com. That's cityspeak@corvallisadvocate.com. There is no way we're going to get to all of these so far. But if you've got something that's pressing and it looks like something that a city councilor can do something about, we'll get it asked if we can. All of that to say, Emily was being able to give you 1 minute to 2 minutes on each of these. You're going to get a little shorter time with me. I'm going to ask you to think of this as a lightning round. Bus services have been touched on a little bit. I'm going to go to Ms. Lewis first. If elected, what can be done to take care of the current reductions in bus services and perhaps expand them? Ms. Lewis, about 30 seconds. Yeah, about 30 seconds.
So unfortunately, we can't bring them in-house because, again, city staff is very strung out and they can't have hiring. However, we've been looking at other third parties that are willing to work with the city and the county is essential to getting our buses.
Have you investigated any other third parties that might be a prospect?
I have not. I have not personally, not yet.
And anything else to add to your answer? That's fine. Ms. Jancila.
I think it's necessary to do an intensive recruitment. There have been drivers that are driving school buses. It is a grueling job to drive a city bus. And so I think that we have to have a little bit better program, probably better pay to entice more drivers into the city bus program.
Okay, and when you say entice them into the city bus program, would you do as Ms. Lewis suggests, looking for a different partner, or would you be doing that through the current partner, or are you going to try to bring it in-house?
I think the only issues that we had with the current partner was that there was just a labor shortage. There is a labor shortage throughout the state and throughout the city. So I think that we have to just do some serious, robust
Got it.
recruitment.
Okay, moving along. And this is a perpetual question. What can be done, and I'll start with Ms. Jancila, what can be done to get a supermarket in South Corvallis, in 30 seconds or less, though this has been going on for 30 years?
Well, we have to entice businesses to come in by partnering public and private. We have to join partnerships to get a grocery store in Southtown.
Any idea what you would do in terms of a recruiting effort?
There is, being in the business community, there are a lot of businesses by talking, partnerships, working with
Got it.
commerce.
Ms. Lewis.
I believe an urban renewal plan will definitely help with getting a grocery store down there. I'm talking with Kate Porsche and Caitlin Dowell will actually definitely be a good resource to talk to in order to find different ways to get that started. I believe that's our best bet to do that as well.
Ms. Lewis, this question will go to you first. If home energy, in terms of the home energy score that is being considered, should it also be applied to landlords seeking to rent units to tenants? I guess a simple yes or no, or 15 seconds in lieu thereof.
I mean, there's already utilities that are posted online for a certain amount of rental units. So I believe that it would be nice, but however, that's for different units. It will become confusing. So yes, in concept, but once there's more, then we can.
I will say, I thought it was an insightful question from this particular viewer. Ms. Jancila, your answer.
I don't think the responsibility should all fall on the homeowner. I think it should be across the board.
Okay. What can be done to make downtown more walkable and bikeable? Ms. Jancila.
Well, one thing, let's start out with the Briae program. It was very well supported, and it would take up parking spots, but that would just make people want to walk and ride their bike. Parking is a major issue downtown. It's no different from any other downtown, but I think that having the Briae program would really reduce a lot of cars downtown.
Okay, and Ms. Lewis.
So alternative transportation is definitely like the key. If you look at different cities like Silver Spring and Colorado Springs, they have very inventive ways of using lighting to make their downtowns and their alleyways more visible and make people feel more secure and safe. So I think looking at examples like that and then implementing that in our own downtown would also be a good idea.
Okay, and then this questioner has asked a two-part question about camps and the Facebook group Corvallis Looks Like Crap. I'll start with you, Ms. Lewis. One, what is your position on the camp sweeps? And two, have you been a participant in the group Corvallis Looks Like Crap, and what are your beliefs about that group?
I have not been in that group. I think that is actually because I believe that group has the wrong approach. I don't agree with the sweeps. However, I feel like managed camping is a good concept, but I'm only open to the concept until it's our only solution, and then it's not a great concept anymore. There's nothing more permanent than a temporary solution. And I feel like once we find the more permanent solutions and those pathways to the permanent solutions, that would be better than our managed.
Ms. Jancila, this particular viewer observes that you have been a member at Corvallis Looks Like Crap or posted there regularly. Those posts are apparently deleted now, or they're not available to this particular viewer. What is your position on camp sweeps? And in one, is this viewer correct about your membership and participation in that group? And what are your thoughts about the group? Ms. Jancila.
I think that it's a shame that we have to have a Facebook group like Corvallis Looks Like Crap. I am a social worker. My specialty is working with homelessness. I think that we can do better. I think our safety net, I would like to partner with the service providers right now and help them so that we don't have that Facebook page that looks like crap. I strongly support our safety net. I want to see them do better, and I believe I can contribute to that.
Ms. Jancila, I guess yes or no, you've been a member, you've posted there regularly, or no?
Not regularly, but yes, I did post.
Okay, and those posts have in some or another become less available to the general public?
Well, what it was is that I don't feel that everybody wants to blame the city or the county. They throw a lot of money into this issue, as well as the federal government, as well as the state. And I would like to see much better use of that money to really get people off the street.
Okay, and your position on the camp sweeps?
I think camping is inhumane, and camp sweeps. I'm on the fence about camp sweeps.
Okay, got it. Next question has to do with housing. This is actually a question that came from the mayoral debate, and we decided to hold it over. Karen Rockwell, who had been an executive director at our local Habitat for Humanity, used to say she could build more units of affordable housing if only the city's system development charges and other fees were less. These fees now approach about $20,000 for an individual home. Would you support changes to waive these fees for some levels of affordable housing, or at least make them sliding scale? Ms. Jancila, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I think that's important. In order to do affordable housing, we have to have public and private partnerships. So yes, I think on a sliding scale would be correct way to go.
Ms. Lewis. Ms. Lewis.
Does not look like she's available at the moment, so would you like to move on to the next question, Steve?
Yes. Okay, as to city budget decisions were made earlier this year, and many expressed their view the Majestic Theater should have its budget and staff increased. The city chose not to do that. Do you believe this was the right choice? And what are your views generally on how budget and personnel played out at Majestic? Ms. Jancila.
I don't know the particulars of how the whys and the how comes, the issues with the Majestic Theater. But I do think that it's a vital part of the community. I think we have to think about other ways of generating more revenue than what is currently being done right now.
Excellent. And then I'm going to go to 30-second closing statement. I guess with Ms. Lewis, I guess now here. We'll wait for Ms. Lewis to come back in, and I will ask her a couple of these questions very briefly. But go ahead, Ms. Jancila, and your closing statement.
I think that we definitely need some a change, and there's some challenges that we have to do in order to make in order to solve the homelessness, in order to have more affordable housing. The younger generation is demanding and consuming houses, but they don't have a lot of options. So I think that's critical. And I just want more representation, more involvement with our social service programs and in downtown general.
Somewhere in the evening, we will attempt to get a closing from Ms. Lewis, who is attempting to rejoin. Emily, why don't we move to the next ward?
All right, moving on to Ward 3 with Hyatt Lytle and Alec Turner. So thank you both for participating in the evening's debate, and I'll go over the same question. So city council terms run 2 years. What is the single issue you would hope to impact in Corvallis during the next 2 years? If you could only impact just one thing, what would your goal be? And what would the city, in your view, need to do to achieve that goal? Mr. Turner, I'll start with you. 2 minutes or less to respond, please.
Hello, thank you. The one thing I wish to change in my term, if I'm elected, would be rent price. Rent prices are going up pretty fast, and the working class is suffering the most. So what I would tackle is, well, rent prices, because housing units will always be in demand. Population is always going to grow. That will always be an issue, and we must always continue to build more housing. But what we can change is rent price. So we have several options like rent price control, maybe a public housing option, and possibly taxing landlords who own more than 3 properties to help increase supply in the market, allowing people to buy homes at a cheaper price, since landlords can't find it profitable to hold more than a certain amount of properties and lease them out to tenants. Yeah, I guess that would be it.
Thank you. And Ms. Lytle, 2 minutes or less to respond, please.
Sure. Thank you, Emily. So for me, there were some crucial land development and transportation exercises that had lots of momentum right before the pandemic, and they seemed to lose that momentum. For South Corvallis, those were the South Corvallis Special Area Plan, where we were really working on revisioning what many know as SCARP, the South Corvallis Area Refinement Plan, which was our old area plan from 1996, that one that envisioned the grocery store and the auction yard that just sat for 21 years. I think a lot of us in Southtown know that plan. So we had started that exercise, and then it came to kind of a hiatus. We also have the South Corvallis Urban Renewal Plan, which I know a lot of folks have been wondering what's going on with that. And with the pandemic, there hasn't been a lot of updates. And if elected, I hope to hold a town hall to update everyone on what is going on and where we are going next with that. And there was a lot of transportation issues that took place right before the pandemic. And we're getting the momentum back, especially with the ODOT Oregon 99 facility plan. So I'm hoping that now that we're moving towards a new normal, especially with public participation back in place after the pandemic, that we can continue these things and really get a dent in some of these land use and transportation planning things and over the next term. Thank you.
Thank you. And then the City Council recently approved the Corvallis Green New Deal for climate and housing justice. As a councilor, what would you do first to implement this resolution? And what are your views in general on the connections between taking action on the climate crisis and providing direct support to community members experiencing houselessness? Ms. Lytle, I'll start with you. 2 minutes or less to respond, please.
Sure. So what comes to mind is, and I've spoke about this in some other debates and campaign literature. We recently had a community member come in and testify, and they spoke about sustainability in Corvallis is a privilege. And this is something that really resonated with me. And when it comes to the Corvallis Green New Deal and sustainability, which, I think it's becoming an increasingly larger conversation, is that we need to talk about access to sustainability and its solutions, and solutions and resources for people who can't afford these things. Not everyone can afford solar panels. Not everyone can afford electric cars. So I think this conversation is going to be a growing one as we talk about the Corvallis Green New Deal and how we can make these things at the city level, at the county level, and local government, and with some of the things in the federal legislation that have just come down, more accessible and for all. And then I'm sorry, Emily, what was the last part of the question?
Yeah, just what are your views generally on the connections between the climate crisis and taking action on that, and then supporting or providing direct support to houseless community members or community members who are struggling with houselessness?
Direct support to houselessness and the Green New Deal. I'm, really interested in having more conversations about geographic equity when it comes to houseless constituents, especially in the area of South Corvallis, because I feel like we've been managing the houseless, like unmanaged camping and houselessness in this part of the city for a long time now. And I know other areas of the town are being affected as well. But there's 49 parks in this city, and the ones down here on south of the confluence are the ones that have had the most wear and tear. And I've got, there's many houseless constituents down here, and they're just getting moved back and forth. And I think that we do need to collaborate more with our social service providers, get everyone at the table, and figure out some better solutions for all. Thank you.
All right, and Mr. Turner, your response, 2 minutes or less, please.
Hi. So to tackle climate change and using the Green New Deal format, nationwide, if you look at the carbon emissions that the United States produces, most of it comes from transportation. So we're going to have to tackle the transportation issue first if we want to see any real impact on our carbon emissions here in Corvallis, because we have a lot of cars here in Corvallis. So what we need to tackle is adequate, robust, efficient public transportation. And then possibly walkable cities so that less cars, equals less CO2 produced. As far as homelessness, I am pro housing for all. So we do have homeless camps around Corvallis. We should provide them an area so that they can set up their tents until we can build them housing, permanent housing. So that would be my my solution on that.
All right, thank you. And then what, as a counselor, would you advocate for to accelerate the availability of housing that's affordable to the bottom 25% of area income earners, and above that for folks up to 50%? Mr. Turner, 1 minute or less to respond, please.
What I would like to do is, if I can make it possible, do a public housing project where the city itself either purchases or builds an apartment complex, which it owns and manages itself without the pursuit of profit. So all they would have to pay for is the maintenance costs of their unit, or that would cut the costs of living by at least half for rent. For homelessness, we can also build a building for them as well. Like we're doing that in Southtown on Highway 99. So we should just do more of those. And the effect this would have on the surrounding area, it would help lower rent price, because that would mean landlords would have to compete with the government to match those prices and make it a little bit more competitive. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And Ms. Lytle, 1 minute or less to respond, please.
Could you please repeat the question? I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. So the question was, what as a counselor would you do to advocate for, or what would you advocate for to accelerate the availability of housing that's affordable to the bottom 25% of area income earners, as well as the 50%?
Sure. So I know that the city has been working a lot on how to vamp up access to affordable housing funds for developers, or incentivizing affordable housing projects. So if elected, I will continue to vote on policies that do promote that type of promotion of those type of funding mechanisms, such as our construction excise tax fund. We recently used that funding to fund a $400,000 land grant project here just in South Corvallis that will build some single family homes. And also we have some state funding that will help with some that we can leverage to build some other affordable housing projects. Thank you.
Great. And then as the city considers various developments, especially in reference to housing, how much weight should neighborhood and homeowners groups and associations have on city decision-making? Ms. Lytle, 1 minute or less to respond, please.
I think that our city, we have, I'm just going to go back to, we have a lot of empty space that needs filling in. We have a lot of opportunities for infill, and we have a lot of deficit for housing, especially single family homes right now. We need all types of housing. We need single family homes. We need more multifamily housing, and we definitely need to just up our inventory, because we need more to drive down the market a little bit in this town. We don't have any workforce housing for people to live here. Upwards of 70% of people who work here don't live here. They're driving in every day. They're driving out every day. We need more housing. So yes, thank you.
Great, thank you. And Mr. Turner, 1 minute or less to respond, please.
I kind of disagree with the single family housing thing. What we need is more mixed use zoning, so that businesses and residents can also exist in the same space. I'm also pro higher density because we don't have a lot of room to expand. So perhaps going upwards would be nice. We need to also focus on transportation-oriented development, which means public transportation needs to be built with the intention of being a hub, or having at least an extension of the hub to incorporate communities to allow them to use public transportation more efficiently. That would also help reduce greenhouse gases. But I'm also an advocate for public transportation being run by the city itself instead of through a third party. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And then what would you do to address the issue of crime? Mr. Turner, 1 minute or less to respond, please.
I'd say about 95% of crime is the result of socioeconomic conditions. We should probably tackle how much it costs to live. People are desperate, and a lot of people are spending a lot of their income on rent alone. Over 50%, I think, I think over 38% of low income earners spend over 50% of their income on rent alone. So if we can lower rent, that will help ease the burden on low income earners, and which would reduce the chances of them committing crimes in the first place. I don't think adding more police or more jails or anything else would improve anything. It's just a bandage on the issue. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And Ms. Lytle, 1 minute or less to respond, please.
We have a major catch and release issue here in the city of Corvallis. We are citing over 50% of our arrests, which has been a huge burden on our officers. So I do support the county's justice system improvement project because we need a facility that is more than use of 27 beds right now. Because we are writing tickets for assault fours, we are writing tickets for big crimes that our officers are unable to use the jail. So when it comes to crime, I'm supportive of getting an actual facility that will have mental health services and the services that people do need. I support the whole model, the community model of having more mental health services and a jail that will support offenders. Thank you.
Right. And then the city council recently chose to forestall its own action on requiring homeowners to obtain an energy usage audit or home energy score prior to putting their homes on the market, and instead put the potential requirement to voters. First, do you personally support the requirement? And do you believe it was better to move the matter to a public vote than for the council to decide? Ms. Lytle, 1 minute or less to respond, please.
So I had for that, the ordinance as it was, I did not agree with the ordinance as it was. I had several amendments that I was hoping to make that evening on that ordinance. So I would absolutely support an ordinance that is worthy of Corvallis. But as the ordinance was, I did not believe it was something to vote on, and that is why I did not vote for it. I voted for it to go to the voters. And yep, there you go. Thank you.
All right, and Mr. Turner, 1 minute or less to respond, please.
Yeah, I like the idea of the home energy score thing. It's kind of like requiring food labels for, well, food products to know what's inside your products. So I think that's something that the consumer would like to have, to know what's in their housing that they're about to purchase. And I like the idea of people having a say in something like that, more democracy, you know, put it to the voters. That would be fine. I think that would be great.
All right, and then by most accounts, the worldwide economy finds itself in uncertain times, and it appears our economy is no exception. Given the times, what steps do you believe the city should be considering next year as it prepares its budget? Ms. Lytle, 2 minutes or less to respond, please.
As we actually just had this conversation in the work session today, as we prepare our budget, we have to look at a lot of things, especially like our facilities and upcoming fees as we assess our fees on our water bill. We're looking at everything holistically and how that's going to affect the community, because we do use taxpayer dollars and we do charge for utilities. So I think that we need to be very thoughtful and intentional with how we do that and how that's going to affect taxpayers and the community. So I plan to have those conversations and be very, very intentional about how we have them and the trade-offs, and considering what is going on with the economy right now. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And then Mr. Turner, 2 minutes or less to respond, please.
Can you actually repeat the question?
Oh, yes. Just given the uncertain times that we find ourselves in with the local economy, what steps do you believe the city should be considering next year as it prepares its budget?
We need to increase revenue for the city. I propose that we add a tax to landlords who lease out housing units. Anything above 3 should have incremental increases in property tax. That should bring in some more income for the city to work with. We should also propose rent price caps so that, you know, we can help improve the local economy so that it frees up income for workers to purchase more goods and services. And then also the money we make from the rent, not the rent, the tax on landlords can go to stuff like public transportation. Also, an idea is taxing OSU, since OSU is a huge footprint on Corvallis. They're considered a nonprofit, so they don't get taxed for anything. So perhaps we should see if we can tax them on certain things that they do, like sports sales or something, help bring in additional revenue to the city. Thank you.
All right, thank you both. I will now hand it over to Steve for audience questions.
Thank you, Emily. So this is kind of lightning round compared to what you just did, because there are a number of questions, some of them from prior city council debate and some of them from mayoral debate and some of them fresh this evening. Ms. Lytle, in about 30 to 60 seconds, you said there were some amendments you would have preferred added to the home energy score ordinance that was proposed. What would some of those amendments be?
Sure. One of the amendments was to not have the sales of tiny homes or RVs to require a home energy score. Right now, the ordinance requires if you sell your RV or a tiny home, which we're trying to use to help promote houseless solutions, you will have to pay for a home energy score. Another one was I wanted to have a discussion with the council. Do we need to include houses within the past 10 years of development when a lot of those are already up to energy efficiency standards? I wanted to have that discussion. I had a proposed amendment. And then I had an amendment to basically not include or I'm sorry, I'm going through my head, but to disclude RVs and tiny homes as well. And then, sorry, that's all.
Now,
I'm trying to keep fast with that.
That's okay. Any response to that, Mr. Turner?
I'm pro tiny home. I'm pro ADU as well. I think there's something to be said about older buildings being allowed to be grandfathered in to the home energy score thing, but also I think older buildings that are like 100 years old could potentially be dangerous if their wiring hasn't been updated, like especially with like energy demands going up, they could just explode and catch fire. So that's something to consider as well.
And then while I have you, Mr. Turner, I'll start with you on the next question, which I'll keep to the energy score discussion. Should the energy score be also attached to landlords as a responsibility towards prospective tenants? Just a yes or no?
Oh yeah, I think landlords should pay.
And then Ms. Lytle.
So landlords have to pay for it.
Right. So this questioner wants to know if, well, gee, a homeowner going to sell a house to another homeowner, why not a property owner seeking to rent an apartment to a lessee?
I'm concerned about how that would be enforced. I would have to understand how that would be enforced first, because I
got it. Okay. As to the bus service reductions, you guys, you both, I think, know what the question really is. What will you do to get services restored, increased? I'll start with you, Mr. Turner.
Bring it in-house. I don't like the idea of having a third, well, not really a third party. We have a contract with them. So bring it in-house so that we can determine how much we pay our workers, because really it's how much we pay them that encourages people to come work for you in the first place.
Ms. Lytle.
Our contract is up next year. I know that we're having trouble with hiring at the city and bringing people to the city. I don't oppose bringing workers in-house, but I am also not opposed to shopping around and looking at other third-party contractors as well. And as long as we thoroughly vet them and look into the employee standards.
Okay, and Ms. Lytle, what would you do in terms of, what is your sense of whether we should be continuing the camp sweeps, homeless camp sweeps?
I feel like we are just going in circles. I feel like it's not cost effective. I feel like it's been a lot of wear and tear on our park system.
What would you do instead?
I feel like we need to get people at the table. We need to look towards more permanent supportive housing solutions. We need to look at more look towards what's working. micro shelters, what's working? Because unmanaged camping doesn't work.
Mr. Turner, same
Uh,
question.
I don't like camping sweeps. I think it's considered harassment for people who basically have nothing, and that's their entire lives. We should provide them adequate housing if we can, and subsidize those who are currently doing that. There's a lot of churches and other people who offer tiny home communities. We should help them, get them the resources they need to help support that, and we should also build housing for them, permanent housing.
There's been discussion of homeless services and expanded homeless services. What is your view? Most of these services are currently in downtown Corvallis. Is that where they need to be? Mr. Turner, about 30 seconds, please.
I think it should be a little bit more spread out. I mean, still kind of central. I mean, a lot of them hang around the campus and on the southern side of downtown.
So,
So-
what do you support? A more scattered approach, or
Yeah, more
really
scattered approach.
centralizing, or
Let's
which one?
leaning to more decentralized. More
Okay, and Ms. Lytle.
Geographic equity. It needs to be all over, decentralized, where everyone in the city can go.
And would that include, say, the Timber Hill neighborhood, Ms.
Yes.
Lytle?
Absolutely.
Mr. Turner.
Yes.
Okay. And then what can be done to make downtown more walkable and bikeable? Mr. Turner, 30 seconds.
Well, if we're looking at walkable cities, our best examples are going to be in Europe, where a lot of them have banned cars from going through downtown in the first place. So perhaps banning cars from downtown and then section them off so that only people can walk through, or people who have disabilities, and then having a public transit system go through there to help drop people off without having to bring their car downtown.
Ms. Lytle.
I've really enjoyed what the the right-of-way program has done, outdoor dining, for those who aren't familiar. I think it has really brought a vibrancy to our downtown. It's made people want to stop. It's made people want to sit and eat outdoors. It's brought people to come visit Corvallis more. So I think these types of treatments, I think lighting can be amazing. I go to other cities. I really enjoy what they do with lighting. I think there's a lot more things that we can be doing to make our downtown core much more inviting to all walks of life.
Right, and then I'll give this to both of you. Probably a yes or no with about 15 to 30 seconds of detail if you want. This is about, you've heard the question before, system development charges and other fees. The city charges on new individual housing units about $20,000 a unit for an individual home. Would you support changes to waive these fees for certain levels of affordable housing, or at least make them sliding scale? I'll start with you, Ms. Lytle.
So I have been interested in cities that have done moratoriums on SDCs, because the city currently, we do parks SDCs, and then we do the regular SDCs. So I am interested because other cities have been doing this, and I think whatever we can do to really get affordable housing development into Corvallis and more development, we need to start being creative about.
So moratoriums or other options?
I think moratoriums, because we still have to figure out how to backfill these development charges.
Okay, and then Mr. Turner.
I'm okay with waiving fees for new constructions, but I'm also in support of the city itself building things like apartments and housing units. So is that something that the city would have to pay? Maybe.
Okay, and then I'm going to move to closing statements, 30 seconds each. I'll start with you, Mr. Turner.
So rent will pretty much be a part of our lives. I just don't want it to be so high, so expensive. I want to allow people to have a home, someplace that they would call a home. So I want to decommodify housing if I can. I want to make it more affordable. I want to get rid of landlords because they're not helping the economy. They're not helping you or any of us. They only help themselves. They make money from simply owning something. And if they consider that work, yeah, we should put an end to it.
Ms. Lytle, 30-second closing.
I have really enjoyed serving as city councilor, and I really enjoy serving South Corvallis, and I really hope to continue the journey. I think there's a lot of momentum here to keep gaining, especially with urban renewal, South Corvallis planning, and I am really hoping to be a part of that, and I hope you will vote for me.
You have both been quite courteous towards one another. You have both stuck to the time limits fairly well, and you have both presented yourselves, I believe, well. Appreciate your participation. Thank you. Emily.
Yes, thank you both. And now we will move on to our final debate with Ward 9 candidates, Cliff Feldman, Tony Cadena, and Nyssa Towsley. Thank you all for joining us for this last portion of this evening's debate. So, same question, city council terms run 2 years. What is the single issue you would hope to impact in Corvallis during the next 2 years if you could only impact just one thing? And what would the city, in your view, need to do to achieve that goal? Mr. Cadena, I'll start with you. 2 minutes or less to respond, please.
Okay. Well, first of all, let me apologize for my appearance. I took a fall a couple of days ago, so this is not a Halloween decoration, although Halloween is my birthday. So I think what I would hope to focus on, if I had to pick one issue, I would put under the broad category of livability. There are lots of issues that are encompassed in that, and I think that as economic times are likely to get tougher, as inflation is an issue, I think we as a city council will have to make trade-offs. And in order to make those trade-offs, I think we would need to do a much better job of public engagement and outreach. We'll be talking about in some of the questions I know about some issues that have come up where one could argue there's been great public engagement. But I also would have the observation that a lot of folks feel like they are not informed or they're not up to speed on things. So I think we can do a better job in that realm. So I think we will have to make these sorts of trade-off decisions. I think a lot of the issues we'll talk about impact livability, and we need to focus on prioritization of those issues in order to make good, smart decisions. And I would encourage us to make decisions that are fiscally sound, and most importantly, that actually achieve the outcomes we hope to achieve. Thank you.
All right, and Nyssa, 2 minutes or less, please.
Hi, thank you. This is a great question. It's a difficult one to answer because there are lots of issues I care about. But if I had to choose just one issue, I would like to address affordable housing. I think that this issue is so interconnected with other issues, including houselessness, climate change, crime, and livability. I think what we need to do is get creative when planning new developments to implement middle housing and mixed use where appropriate, and ensuring that these new developments are not just accessible only to the wealthy. I also want to address the issue of higher and higher rent costs. Part of that will be building more housing, but I am also open to discussing options like rent control and vacancy taxes to address speculative buying. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Feldman, 2 minutes or less to respond, please.
Thank you. In my view, housing lifts all boats. It lifts everyone at every level of income. It helps everyone who wants to live here. It helps people live in the city who now have to commute. And by increasing the housing supply, you then have people living in the city who are using local businesses, they're shopping at local businesses, and that increases the level of income that the city sees. It increases the level of taxes that it brings to different areas of government, and it allows us to do a lot more things. But we have to find solutions for housing for really everyone who wants to live here, for houseless people, for people who are have young families, for retired people who can't even find places to downsize to. If I could do one thing for the city, it would be to find ways to create more housing opportunities for everyone who wants to live here.
Right, and then the City Council recently approved the Corvallis Green New Deal for climate and housing justice. As a councilor, what would you do first to implement this resolution? And what are your views in general on the connections between taking action on the climate crisis and providing direct support to community members experiencing houselessness? Nyssa, I'll start with you. 2 minutes or less to respond, please.
Thank you. I think houselessness and climate change are highly related, if not inextricable. Fires and other climate events force people out of their homes, and unfortunately, we are going to see more and more of that. What we need to do is meet the immediate needs of the unhoused while also looking for long-term solutions for both that issue and climate change. Fundamentally, I think we need a paradigm shift. We cannot keep thinking of money and resources spent on combating climate change as a cost. Rather, money and resources spent on combating climate change are investments in our future. Saving a bit of money now will not matter if we do not have a habitable planet later. I also agree with Councillor Lytle that we need to bring everyone along for the climate journey to ensure that there are options for participating in climate change amelioration for people at all socioeconomic levels. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Feldman, 2 minutes or less to respond, please.
So everything at this point needs to be green. Everything that we do, everything that we consider, everything that we build, all transportation, the way we live needs to accommodate the reality of a changing world. And we are going to be seeing, I believe, over the next 5, certainly 10, probably undoubtedly 20 years, we're going to see refugees moving to places like Oregon and north where there is water, because water is life. And we are seeing so many waterless communities now. I keep reading about cities in California that are literally running out of water and they have nowhere to turn. What are those people going to do? They're going to look for a place where they can live. And we are probably right in their sights. So everything that we do, everything that we consider, every house, every transportation option needs to be green, because that is the reality. We need housing. It needs to be green. We have to get cars off the road by creating new bikes and walkways. And we have to make sure that the housing that we inevitably must build will have simple transportation and car-less transportation options available to it that allows people of all income areas to access every part of the city.
Thank you. And Mr. Cadena, 2 minutes or less to respond, please.
Yes. So as I listened to the discussion as the City Council passed the Green New Deal, a few things came to mind. One is that the city is already taking significant action and has a climate action plan, a strategic operating plan that encompasses that climate action plan. I think the first step that the City Council should take in the implementation of the Green New Deal is to look for areas where there is work already being done, make sure that that is prioritized appropriately, and to address areas where perhaps what the resolution might call for is not completely addressed, and sort of rethink and try to understand the implications of what the resolution is calling for. So I definitely think that this ups the ante for the response that the City Council has in its climate action plan. I think those things definitely need to be re-examined. As far as the connection between houselessness and climate change, I think that as I listen to the debate, there certainly are some connections. I think there are more connections, though, that are not strictly related to climate change in the realm of houselessness. Obviously, people who are unhoused will have a disproportionate impact as a result of climate change. But there are also lots of other issues in that very diverse population, issues of substance abuse, mental health, et cetera, those are areas which require resources and funding, and we shouldn't forget those and assume that addressing it from a climate perspective is all that's needed.
All right, thank you. And what, as a council, would you advocate for to accelerate the availability of housing that's affordable to the bottom 25% of area income earners and above that for folks up to 50%? Mr. Cadena, 1 minute or less to respond, please.
Well, I think to increase the availability of affordable housing, obviously we need to increase the number. And in order to do that, I think we need to look carefully at the annexation of properties that are already within the city limits that could be purposed for increased housing, denser housing, et cetera. I think that the encouragement of starter homes, small homes, apartments certainly allows for affordability. The more competition there is for rental housing will help to reduce rental prices. I think that's something that definitely needs to be addressed. So I would also take a look at our land development code, make sure that we are gearing towards building and increasing variety and number of housing units that could be available.
All right, thank you. And Mr. Feldman, 1 minute or less to respond, please.
So I believe that the city needs to prioritize areas that have access to existing infrastructure and transportation for a lot of its housing. For example, in Ward 9, there just recently was constructed a very large storage facility. This is off the northeast Walnut, just east of Highway 99. And I'm sure people need storage, but I don't believe that they need storage that is accessible directly to Highway 99. I don't believe that they need storage that is on a bus line. I don't believe that they need storage in that particular part of town. So that's an area where zoning comes into play, and we need to look at all zoning options to make the best use of space that is available where we have infrastructure and transportation.
All right, thank you. And Nyssa, 1 minute or less, please.
Yes, thank you. I think it is more important for us to think about building up rather than out. One of the things I like about Corvallis is its relatively compact size. And I think decreasing sprawl will be important. Not just in maintaining that feel of the city, but also in making sure there's not more driving and therefore more CO2, therefore impacting the climate. Ultimately, I think the city needs to look for creative solutions for different kinds of families and different ways of living, especially utilizing middle housing where we can. I especially like the idea of cottage clusters in terms of preserving green and communal space in the city. And I think they may be a great solution for young people or even multi-generational families. I think it would be important to ensure that the new developments are incentivized to be made affordable and not just made for the wealthiest residents of the city. I also mentioned earlier, but I will also reiterate that rent and rental units are important in affordable housing. This, of course, like I said, involves building more units, but I'm also, again, open to other options like rent control and vacancy taxes. Thank you.
Thank you. And then as the city considers various developments, especially in reference to housing, how much weight should neighborhood and homeowners groups and associations have on city decision-making? Mr. Feldman, 1 minute or less to respond, please.
I'm sorry, please repeat the question.
Sure. So how much weight should neighborhood and homeowners groups and associations have on city decision-making when it comes to developments related to housing?
Honestly, that's something that I haven't really studied, but I believe that at this point in time, because housing is so crucial and the need for housing at all levels is so crucial, that we need to just keep every possibility on the table. That's all I can say.
All right, thank you. And Nyssa, 1 minute or less to respond, please.
I certainly think they must be involved, but I think we need to be careful to make sure that we're also including other groups or individuals who may not be a part of a homeowner or neighborhood association. Not every area in the city has one of those. So I think it's important to make sure that we're including everyone in the discussion, especially renters or homeowners who are low income and not represented by such groups.
Thank you. And Mr. Cadena, 1 minute or less, please.
Yes, so I mentioned at the outset that improvement in community engagement is critically important. I think neighborhoods should definitely be included in this decision process. However, I also believe in honest and direct communication. So there are lots of initiatives that are coming down from the state, not initiatives, mandates. And I think it's incumbent upon us to communicate well with neighborhood associations and neighborhoods, even if they're not organized into associations, about the likely impacts and what will be required. So it's best not to ask for input if we're not going to use it, but it is important to try to solicit input to make the best decisions possible that are responsive to the neighborhood needs in light of what is coming down from the state.
Thank you. And then what would you do regarding the issue of crime, or what would you do to address that? Nyssa, 1 minute or less to respond, please.
I agree with what some other folks have been saying tonight in terms of addressing crime at the root is key. People are not generally committing crime because it's fun. It's because they feel they have no choice, or it is driven by other socioeconomic factors. So addressing the sources of crises in our community that fuel crime is important, especially affordable housing. That will be crucial. I think we need to make it easier to both live and work in Corvallis. Lots of people have touched on the topic of people not living in Corvallis when they work here and the impacts that that has. That's all tied together. And I also think it will be important in addressing crime to ensure that we are investing in social services and safety nets, especially mental health services, substance abuse services, and improving the justice system infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Cadena, 1 minute or less, please.
Yes, so I think the causes of crime are multifaceted. Obviously, if we have a robust economy, that is certainly an impact. There are crimes that are associated with substance abuse and mental health issues. I think providing the services, and that may be part of the new Justice Center, which can do some of that, but utilizing existing services, I think, is clear. There are other aspects that Commissioner Lytle mentioned of catch and release for repeat offenders. I think we need to have a justice system that removes the incentive for folks to go out and commit crime repeatedly. So I think there are different populations of lawbreakers, and some really are tied towards mental health and substance abuse issues. We need services for those. We need different solutions for other types. Thank you.
Right, and Mr. Feldman, 1 minute or less to respond, please.
I think the cause of a lot of crime is simply the lack of opportunity. I think people that don't have the stability of permanent housing are probably more apt to commit crime. The people that don't have employment options are more likely to commit crime. I believe that people who don't have access to services are more likely to commit crime. So it's really a systemic support system that needs to be in place. And that includes mental health. It includes some degree of policing, but policing is not the answer. It's just part of it. But certainly, I think a lot of those folks are either houseless or nearly so because they're driven to desperation, and they need to have the stability.
Right, and the City Council recently chose to forestall its own action on requiring homeowners to obtain a home energy score prior to putting their homes on the market, and instead put the potential requirement to voters. First, do you personally support the requirement, and do you believe it was better to move the matter to a public vote than for the council to decide? Mr. Feldman, 1 minute or less to respond, please.
So I believe in the I believe in this program in essence, but I think that there are probably ways that it can be implemented without codifying it. So, for example, as someone who has bought and sold homes over the years, I have offered to show a buyer utility bills. And when I have purchased a home, I have asked to seek utility bills. To me, this would be the most simple way of getting a pretty good picture of what the costs involved are for utilities, which a lot of people don't really consider when they buy a home. So I believe that the concept is very strong. I'm not certain that this particular proposal was exactly the right way to go about it.
All right, thank you. And Nyssa, 1 minute or less to respond, please.
Yes, I support the home energy score, including making it mandatory. I believe it is just as much a consumer protection issue as a climate change issue. Home energy scores are more accurate representations of energy costs rather than a sample utility bill. So I think that's where consumer protections come in. I believe many concerns about the program can be addressed through sensible policy writing, such as subsidizing or waiving fees for low-income home sellers and putting appropriate parameters on what types of homes should fall under the requirement. I do not, however, agree with sending it to the voters. I believe this type of policymaking is what the council is charged with. What I don't understand is why the issue is treated with such urgency and why the council felt they had to send it to the voters rather than taking a couple more weeks to continue discussions at the council level. While we must take swift action against climate change, a couple of weeks to ensure the ordinance was at its best would not have been the worst thing. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Cadena, 1 minute or less to respond, please.
So I do think the way in which it was handled at the city council was what I would call a failure of leadership. I know there are folks who worked on the home energy score who feel like there's been years of public engagement. Yet I also know there are lots of folks, as Andrew Struthers spoke to, who feel unaware of this. To me, that tells me it was not really very well formulated. Because of the lack of engagement, sending it to the voters is probably the least bad alternative. My biggest concern about the home energy score is, does it accomplish its stated objective, which is to get older homes to be retrofitted to a higher energy standard? And I followed the Portland report to the city council. I saw a lot of what in the nonprofit world is called effort-based metrics, and not really very much in the way of outcome-based metrics, meaning did it accomplish its goal?
Thank you. And of course, by most accounts, the worldwide economy finds itself in uncertain times, our local economy being no exception. Given these times, what steps do you believe the city should be considering next year as it prepares its budget? Mr. Cadena, 2 minutes or less to respond, please.
Well, I think the worldwide economy certainly is very uncertain at this point. It is likely that we are already in a recession or heading in that direction. Commodity prices have been on the rise. I think this is imperative that the city council be much more deliberative about the prioritization of items in the budget and be prepared for shortfalls, potential shortage of labor, increasing costs. I think we should plan fiscally conservatively and in the upcoming budget cycle. I do think that in recent, prior to the last 6 months, certainly the financial returns have been very good from a public employee retirement system perspective. Yet those rates continue to go up for cities. That takes money out of budgets that could otherwise be used for good purposes. I think if the economy continues the way it is, it's likely that we will see a downturn in those return on investment for the public employees retirement system, meaning increasing costs for the city. So I think this just puts additional pressure on the city to prioritize and plan carefully and plan for contingencies to the extent that perhaps state funding and other funding will not be as readily accessible as it had been.
All right, and Mr. Feldman, 2 minutes or less to respond, please.
As someone who is retired and lives on a fixed income, I know what it's like to have a finite amount of money for an infinite amount of needs sometimes, or so it seems. But the city at its most basic level needs to prioritize essential services that keep everyone in the city safe. And these would be obviously things like police, fire, emergency response, utility, infrastructure, so on and so forth. So that's where when revenues are down, your essential services need to be protected more than anything. And it's unfortunate that we may be seeing a drop in revenue, but the reality is that we're going to have to be a lot smarter, and we're going to just have to make better choices, just as people do every day, and just as I do living on a fixed income. So we just have to be smart, make good choices, and just hope that this is a temporary situation.
All right, and Nyssa, 2 minutes or less to respond, please.
Obviously, there seems like there is a never-ending list of competing priorities when it comes to budgeting. So I'm going to just call out 3 that I think are going to be of particular importance. I think fire prevention and fire management is going to be more and more important, unfortunately, as climate change progresses. So I think we need to make sure we have adequate services to be prepared for fire emergencies. Transportation is certainly an issue that I'm sure we'll talk about more, so I'm not going to get too far into that, but I do know our contract is coming up and it's time to consider all of our options. And then finally, I think the city should consider investing in improving energy efficiency in city-owned buildings, which may include upfront costs, but will have long-term payoffs, both in utility costs and, of course, climate impacts. So those are 3 issues that I would want to consider as a councilor when we look at the budget for the city. Thank you.
All right, thank you all. I will now hand it over to Steve for audience questions.
Thank you, Emily. The subject of cluster housing has arisen a few times over the course of this evening and over the last 4 evenings of debate in this cycle that we have hosted. For viewers out there or anybody that's on this Zoom call, a white paper on the subject was put together by the City Club of Corvallis a few years back. If you're interested in a local take on this, you can Google for that, and I will leave that subject at that. Okay, and thank you to the City Club member that pointed that out to me. Okay, let's move to camps, and I'll start. I will go ahead and I'll start with Nyssa. Yeah, homeless camps, sweeps, yes, no. What do you think is best course? About 30 seconds to a minute.
Yes, absolutely. I do not think that random sweeps are compassionate or effective. So I do not think they are an acceptable solution. I think if we need to do sweeps, then managed camping and sweep more like rolling basis, sweep more moratoriums are the way to go. But ultimately, we need longer term solutions than sweeps.
Okay, Mr. Cadena.
I do think that sweeps without a long-term solution doesn't make a lot of sense. I understand why sweeps are conducted for sanitation issues, trash issues, usability of parks, concern about degradation of parks. I understand all of that. I think a solution of more managed camps might be a good step on the way towards a more better solution for all involved. But I don't see that just kind of moving sweeps from 30-day moratorium won't be effective unless we have an endpoint in mind.
Mr. Feldman.
So I believe that sweeps are unnecessary and very unfortunate because the people who get caught up in them are the people who need our support more than anything. Typically, it's those folks who have the least stability in their lives. And when you take their few possessions away from them, you have accomplished absolutely nothing. So the bigger picture is what we need to look at here, and that is to have more permanent solutions, even if it's starting with shelters, which are more of an emergency thing, but moving up to affordable housing that we can put people into on a permanent basis and keep them safe and stable.
I'll start with Mr. Cadena on this. Police reform. Should we be taking some funding away from local police, moving it to social services or something of that nature? Mr. Cadena, about 30 seconds to a minute.
So I think more effective policing can be accomplished with more effective training. Everything that I've studied about this issue suggests that if officers are able to be more responsive, de-escalate, control situations without the use of force, that is more effective. I do think that much of the response does need to address the mental health and substance abuse issues that the police encounter. Unfortunately, the police are often the first to respond. And so additional training can help them to be able to respond even in those situations and then access the appropriate resources.
Keep funding at the same level?
Yes, or more.
Okay. And Ms. Towsley, next on the question, if you would.
Yes, I believe that policing is fundamentally reactive rather than proactive. And I think that addressing crime should be moved to a more proactive lens in terms of providing more services for mental health, substance abuse, so on. But that being said, I think we need to support that through additional funding for those services. And I would be open to discussions about reducing police funding in favor of other social services in order to accomplish that root cause.
Mr. Feldman.
I would not decrease police funding, but I would change the way that police respond to people who are having a mental health issue. For example, in Corvallis, a uniformed officer and a mental health professional should be the ones responding to calls. And I'm sorry, a police officer should not be the one responding to calls, but a mental health professional should be the one responding to calls because they are trained for it, and police are generally not trained to deal with people having a mental health crisis.
Keep funding at the same level or reduce?
Yes, I would keep police funding at the same level.
And in fact, to that point, Ms. Towsley, keep funding it the same or reduce?
I think I would be open to reduction if we could link it to services that
Great, thank you. And then I'll start with you, Mr. Feldman, for the next one. The jail proposal currently proposed by the county, the future of that is obviously uncertain. Voters have rejected it 3 times in the past. Could the police perhaps build a jail on their own? Could the city build its own jail facility? Mr. Feldman, about 30 seconds.
I suppose, yes, the city could build another jail facility.
Would you support that?
No, I don't think I would, because I believe that having a joint facility with the county would save both the county and the city money.
Okay, and then Ms. Towsley, in the event that the county can't get this passed, spend for a jail or not on a city level?
I agree that it is probably going to be more cost effective to have a joint venture than having just one of our own.
And Mr. Cadena?
I'm not aware of any cities that build jails. I could be wrong. I believe most of those are operated out of the county. I think running a jail is a very different skill set than being a police department, and I would look for a solution that encompasses the county.
Okay, let's move over to the questions that viewers have given us about housing. Rent control currently there's state law, and that state law is what it is. And apparently this means that folks could see a rent increase of about 15% this next year, a little less than. Would you advocate for the state perhaps adjusting laws so that municipalities can, in fact, set their own rent control ordinances? And what do you think Corvallis's should be? Mr. Cadena.
So I think one of our key issues is increasing the availability of affordable housing. I would look to other cities' experiences as well as what has happened in Oregon to see if rent control is a way to make that happen. I fear from other cities' experiences that with rent control, that it will benefit the folks that are covered by rent control, but it actually ends up decreasing available rental housing. And I think that would be the exact wrong thing to do. I think we should look for other means to increase the stock of rental housing, which would have the natural competitive force of bringing down rental costs.
And Ms. Towsley.
I believe that I believe more localized control makes sense because there are local context issues about housing. A lot of cities, the Corvallis' size might not be having the same kinds of problems because of the history of the city. And so I think having more localized control to address the local context in terms of setting rent control makes sense to me.
Thank you, Nyssa. And then Tony, I'm going to move to you on this question, if you would. Or excuse me, I think Mr. Feldman.
Yeah,
Cliff.
I think. All right, thanks.
Sorry about that.
I don't believe that a rent increase of up to 15% is justified for most landlords, and I have been a landlord, but unless their mortgage has increased, which typically is not the situation, they are not experiencing additional costs to operate and own that piece of property. So I believe that I have to agree with Tony that the real solution is to increase the supply, and then you will hopefully decrease the cost to everyone across the board, but not rent control.
And Mr. Feldman, I want to start with you on this. The subject of home energy scores has been discussed at length this evening, but what has not been discussed is that much, anyhow, in this discussion, has been the idea that landlords would be required to hand a home energy score over to a prospective tenant. What is your view of that?
I agree with it. I believe that even a lowly renter, should have the right to know what utilities will cost if that is a part of their rental agreement. And I think it's ethically better for the landlord to share that information with the renter and give the renter the choice of accepting that property and that lease or not.
Thanks, Cliff. Nyssa?
Yeah, I feel very much the same as Cliff. I think more information is always better and more empowerment to renters is always better. Home energy scores have been shown to be more of accurate representations of utility costs than just a utility bill. So I think it's a great tool to give to our renters to make informed decisions.
Tony?
So the economist me definitely likes the transparency of information and availability of information. I think that's a great idea. I think the way in which the home energy score has been formulated from the reports that I've seen, I'm not sure that it's particularly meaningful for renters because it includes things that a renter will not be able to potentially influence with the landlord. So I think more about specific energy usage on a short-term basis would be more valuable. So I'm not sure what form that would look like in a revised home energy score, but I think that should be something that should be looked at.
Yes, I'm going to start with you on this one. It has to do with the bus services we've been discussing in our debates this cycle. And viewers really do want to know, what can the city do and what would you advocate for if elected?
Absolutely. I mean, I think with our contract coming up, it's time to consider all options, including putting out an RFP for vendors, as well as considering bringing it in-house. I think we should mainly strongly consider higher wages for bus drivers. While higher wages are an upfront expense, I believe long-term it saves money because it is always more expensive to replace employees than to retain them.
Thank you. And Tony?
Yeah, I think we should take the opportunity as the contract is coming up to look for alternatives. I'm a little hesitant to think about bringing it in-house because I understand how the city staff is stressed and stretched rather, and so I think one more management task could make it much more difficult. I'm not sure bringing it in-house solves the issue from the perspective of the real reason we're having troubles is because of the labor shortage and the cost of labor. But I think we should definitely look at alternatives, including staying with our current supplier, outsourced supplier, or pursuing others.
Cliff?
So I also don't believe that bringing it in-house is probably the best choice, because you do have to then add new levels of employees, management, supervision that are going to be difficult, as opposed to some company that has been doing this regularly and they have systems in place. I actually have some proposals for bus service that I think might improve the situation. What I would like to see is higher use of more frequent buses on the higher use routes, such as around the campus, in and out of downtown. I would actually also like to see at some point the large buses that continuously roll by with 3 people in them to be replaced by smaller vehicles that could run more frequently. Obviously, that means that there will be a need for more employees, and hopefully that's something that will happen down the road. But if we have more frequent bus service in the areas that need them the most, I believe that we can charge a little bit for those, call it express services. I think I'd be happy to pay $1 for a bus ride if I know that that bus is going to be there every 15 minutes and it takes me right to where I need to go.
Okay, let's move along to a new question. I'm surprised was not asked earlier. Why are there not food carts in North Corvallis, and what would you do to encourage them? I will start with you, Mr. Feldman.
Well, food carts are wonderful, but they generally are in a place where there is a destination. So either there's some entertainment nearby, or it's typically downtown, because that's a destination for people who are shopping or just going out on the night. But I think, sure, I put food carts in. I live in North Corvallis, so put food carts in North Corvallis. I would welcome that big time. The thing is like, you have to have a place and you have to make it into a destination so that when people arrive, they're not just going to spend $5 on food, but maybe there would be some other options for them locally to do some walking or shopping or something interesting other than just buying a taco.
Tony.
Yeah, I think food carts are really in a place where folks generally are pedestrians and able to walk around downtown area, except so absent, unless there's some zoning or other issues that has discouraged them, I think it's probably lack of market demand. I think I would say there's probably not food carts in North Portland for the same reason that, unfortunately, along 9th Street, there have been quite a lot of turnovers of restaurants and a difficult environment for those to succeed. Some folks may recall the Sizzler that existed, where it is now basically Les Schwab. So lots and lots of things, lots and lots of reasons go into why there's not as many food choices in North Portland.
Okay, and then Tony, I'm going to start with you on this one, and then after these, we're gonna move to closing. In terms of affordable housing, system development charges and other fees, they amount to just about $20,000 for an individual home. Would you support changes or a waiver for these fees for certain levels of affordable housing, maybe some sort of sliding scale?
So I like the idea more of a sliding scale, so that development charges scale with the size and expense of the development. That makes a lot of sense to me. I think the concept of waivers, while on the surface seems like a good idea, it puts the city in an interesting situation where, because they still need to fund the activities and efforts which the system development charges pay for, you then incent the city to perhaps look at other projects which they are more than willing to approve, because they bring high systems development charges. So I think outright waivers are more challenging. More sliding scale is something that I would look at as probably a more successful outcome.
Okay, and then I'll move over to Nyssa, please.
Yeah, I agree with Tony here. I think a sliding scale is a great idea, especially if the sliding scale can include $0 as the one of the polls. So I think, but then we can still recoup some of the costs or get some of the revenue through the sliding scale that is not 0.
Thank you. And I'll go ahead and move over to Cliff, please.
So building fees aren't very high, but there's a reason for them, and they act as a buy-in to people who are building a new house and enjoy all of the infrastructure and the facilities that the city has built before they ever got there. But I believe that we certainly can find a way to reduce those costs for people who are going to make the best use of available land. I think, for example, on the lowest end of a scale should be the cost for adding an ADU to an existing lot, because when you build an ADU, you're not increasing the costs of any additional infrastructure. Everything is already in place. So some form of a sliding scale, or certainly some kind of reduction, is needed simply because we need so much more housing.
Thank you all. We'll move over to closing statements, and we're going to start with Nyssa. 30 seconds, Nyssa.
Yes, I just want to start by saying thank you for putting on this event and having me here. One of the things that has become clear to me throughout the discussions I've had with my fellow candidates is that we share the same values, but we share different approaches sometimes towards achieving those values. And so with ranked choice voting, I would encourage you to rank me as your first choice, because I think my values sync up with the community very well. But I would also accept your second choice vote. Thank you.
And then we'll move over to Cliff.
So again, thanks for having this event. It's a great way for people to participate, and by people I mean people in the city, and that's why I am doing this. I've been a volunteer in Corvallis since I moved here. I volunteer at the Majestic. I volunteer for public radio station KORC. I volunteer with the Corvallis Sustainability Committee. And my candidacy is really about connecting people to the city and making people understand that the city is here to serve them. And that's exactly what I would hope to do.
And then to you, Tony.
Thank you again for hosting this event. I'm running because I would like to serve the city and our ward. I have a lot of experience in finance, in operations, large business, small business, as a university professor, and in the nonprofit world. I really hope to represent all of the people of the ward of Ward 9, as well as the city of Corvallis. And I like to say that I'm not a single issue candidate, and I will support not only the people who vote for me, but the people who do not vote for me. So I hope I'm your first choice or your second choice, or even if I'm not your choice at all, I will still represent you. Thank you.
Thank you all. I want to mention to the audience that we appreciate you being engaged enough to be here for these debates. The Corvallis Advocate will publish its endorsements over the weekend. City Club of Corvallis does not do endorsements of any kind. There will also be some information about ranked choice voting. To the candidates, you've all done quite well for yourselves this evening. You've run a clean debate and you've followed moderation and the time limits, more so than many. So quite appreciate that. Thank you for participating as well. Emily.
Thanks, Steve. And yes, a big thanks to all of you for joining us tonight and for being so respectful and courteous. And of course, we want to extend a big thanks to our Corvallis Advocate staff and all of the work they do behind the scenes that make the CitySpeak Town Halls possible. Please check our website for updates on upcoming CitySpeaks, as well as archives of past CitySpeaks. And again, thanks to Peak Sports and First Alternative Natural Foods Co-op for helping to make this series possible. And with that, this CitySpeak is now adjourned. Good night, everyone, and thank you for joining.